Okay, so let's get down to business and we're going to get rolling here. All right. Whoops. So here we go. Again, welcome everybody. And what's going on with the SAT? What's going on with college admissions? That is the question. Uh, Unless you've been in a cave or something, you know, the last 10 to 12 weeks of everybody's life has been a lot different. And this is one of the things that we are dealing with. So I want to welcome all the parents, welcome any students sitting in. Sit back, enjoy. So just a couple quick things here. This is a live presentation. I am recording it, so if you're in the system, you know, anything you say probably is going to be recorded. Everything that's going on here is not anything officially sanctioned or endorsed by anyone. This is basically research I have done, either directly talking to first-party sources or the internet, like where everybody else gets their information. And if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I'll see them after we unshare, and we'll go from there. Here's the basic agenda. So this whole college admissions and how the SAT and AC fits in, what's the same as it always was, at least as of May 28th, 2020. What's changed? What are admissions people thinking? What are recommended test prep timelines as of today? What options does your child have at this point? And will all this impact your plans? And then some question and answers. So again, here's the title, What's Going On? I'm Steve Green. I have worked with some of you. I haven't worked with others of you. I appreciate you coming on. I've been in education pretty much my whole life. Most of it as a private tutor and educator. Spent a lot of time in the classroom at high schools, middle schools, and at universities. I wrote a book, which is about basically how to study, how to manage your time. I host a podcast that's an informational, instructional, educational podcast about how to take actions to maximize your education. And I host an online community. But the goals for tonight are to address commonly asked questions and concerns, give you some suggestions you can put into action right away if you need to give you some channels for support. So again, here's our agenda. I'm going to jump right in. So let's talk about what is the same with admissions at this point. Well, the ACT was less disrupted than the SAT. They are having a test date in June. It is on the 13th, which is in about 3 weeks, a little less. The SAT was more disrupted. They do not have another test till August. Now, a little bit more on this later. The SAT missed 2 or 3 tests, and the reason there's a differentiation there, I'll explain in a second. The ACT 1 or 2. So again, the ACT was less impacted. The reason the SAT missed more was because some of the areas of the country that got hit right around the middle of March, and there was an SAT March 14th. That was right about when everything went down in terms of shutdowns and I guess what we're calling code red or what have you. So around here, SATs were not given, but they were in about 90% of the places nationally. So the ones that were really impacted were in May and June. But in case you're not aware of the SAT or ACT, these are exams that colleges use as admission criteria. Nowadays, more or less every school will accept both. There are exceptions to that. Some favor one test over the other. Probably the biggest differentiator is that you can superscore the SAT, which means you can take different test times you took the test and combine them as a so-called superscore. Can't really do that with the ACT. And the reason there's an asterisk there is because they are acting to change that. And the tests overlap a lot in content. I'm going to get into a little bit more on all this shortly. So here's a kind of a graph of what, or a table of what's going on. So both the tests have an English writing and grammar section. The reason there's different names is because they call them different things, but they test almost exactly the same thing. They both have math. ACT is all with the calculator. SAT is about 20% of it that's without it. They both have reading, extremely similar. The biggest difference is that the ACT has a science section, which the SAT does not have, and they both have optional essays. And from my perspective, because my role is helping students get ready for these tests, they are similar prep wise. So, which one's better for your child? Well, the best way to really determine this is one of the most common questions I get asked, and I had just in the last 2 days about 5 discussions about this, is to do a diagnostic. And the diagnostic can be somewhat cursory, an hour. It can be really big, 8 hours. I have found there's about a 2 hour diagnostic that I found is accurate, just as accurate as some of the longer ones. Really, really, if you want to really know, I would tell you to take both tests. That's not always practical, which brings us back to the diagnostic. But again, the prep is very similar. So what you can do is you could start out prepping for the SAT, and most of the stuff, maybe 90% of it, is transferable right to the ACT. And it's not like you got to start over and relearn things. So there's some good news there. Again, this is basically a different way of showing the same things, but SAT does not have the science section. Here's a biggie in terms of taking the test. The pacing on the ACT is much faster, a lot less time per question, about 25 seconds less. It doesn't sound like that much maybe in real time, but when you're actually taking a test, it's a substantial difference. The broad thinking is that the SAT is more of a reasoning test, whereas the ATT is a little more straight. ACT is more straightforward, like a school test. And again, you got the super scoring ideas. Okay, so that's basically what's the same. I went through that just to kind of set the stage because this is really what we're looking at. The ACT has come out with an idea now, starting in September, that they're going to have what they call sectional testing, which means this. A student could take a full ACT. You have to do a full one first, which at this point you could do in June or July or September, but it has to be after that. Then you could go back in and only take the areas that you didn't do well at or want to do again. So let's give you an example that the SAT, you took an ACT, you did great in the English section, didn't do as well in the reading, math, or science. You could just go back in and take those three and keep your English score. You have to take at least one, obviously. And if you took all four, you'd be taking the whole test again. It's a little bit of a challenge in terms of scheduling because what they're talking about is having different test centers. Like one test center would do complete tests and another one would do partial tests. I think they're still trying to work some of that out. But this is a big step up in terms of flexibility. Whether it's a reason to take the ACT versus the SAT, I'm not sure I would go that far with it, but you do not have that option for the SAT. Now, the SAT is adding another test. To this point, the ACT has not added back additional tests to make up for the canceled test. The SAT has added one in September. There's a timeline I'm going to show you shortly. Both places are considering, and I italicize that because considering is definitely not definite, online options. So this is a quote right from the College Board, which is the company that administers the SAT. In the event that schools do not open in the fall, they'll provide a digital for home use. You'll see eventually they're going to kind of pull back on this and say it's really more of a last resort. The trial was the AP exams, which they were highlighting here. And the AP exams did not go completely great in terms of the home experience, which was probably not a great omen for the SAT. But point is, it's being considered. These are all things as a parent or a student who's planning to take these tests in the summer or the fall or in a year or two. You may have different options that don't exist now and didn't exist up until this point. So here's just some very recent press. And this, again, this is the idea of the home test. Increasingly unlikely they're going to be giving a home test. Here's what are admissions people thinking. So what I am getting, and I'm going to position by saying I know a lot of admissions people at different schools. I don't talk to them that frequently. This is not the admissions time of year. So there's a lot of people that work in admissions in August through maybe December, but then have other jobs at the university the rest of the year. And a lot of them are furloughed. So it took me a little while to track some people down. But What I am getting is that most colleges think this is a blip, this is an aberration, this is not going to be an every year sort of thing, and that this year's cycle, in other words, children who are juniors right now, obviously did not go by the normal path, and there'll probably be accommodations made for that class. Maybe they won't hold them to the tests as much, and maybe not even their GPAs because of what happened in the last quarter of school. But everybody's telling me that once this cycle's through, that things are going to go back to quote unquote normal. They don't expect this to be a long term shift. In other words, the idea of what goes in to college acceptance isn't going to change very much long term. They may adjust it for kids who are juniors now, who got pushed back a little bit, but probably not for people who are in 10th grade or ninth grade or younger. So basically, what do colleges look for? And this is a broad list, but this is basically what it is. Top of the list almost always is grades, GPA, what they call academic rigor. Academic rigor is basically a description of the intensity or difficulty level of the classes. So an AP class is kind of at the top of that list, and an honors class, then a an academic level class, and then maybe a lower track class under that. So student who gets a 3.6 or whatever, taking a number of honors and AP classes would be considered higher standing than one that got a 3.6 without taking any of those classes. Um, then second one usually is the SAT or ACT scores. And we're not really sure exactly whether that's going to land now, but that's usually one of the higher, usually the number two consideration. You've got extracurriculars, things going on in school, things going outside of school. You've got the personal statements, you got specializations. And specializations, by what that I mean is some students just have a particular skill. I'm working with a girl now who's looking to get a scholarship because she's in a school newspaper. She's really into journalism. She's going to school for journalism. She actually might get a scholarship for journalism. It's not the kind of thing you think about all the time. Typically, you think of things like that for sports or things like that, but they happen in a lot of different areas in colleges, and that's a different discussion. But that's what specializations is. Then other sometimes you'll have legacies. You got grandparents, uncles, parents go to a certain school. Not many people are donating libraries, but that would fall into other. But the bottom line and the important thing on this slide is that grades, GPA, and the strength of your academic coursework is almost always, and this just keeps getting reinforced whenever I have a conversation with a college person, as the number one thing that they look at. Okay, so here again, this made the news. This is this week. California University, biggest university system in the country, decides they're going to drop SATs and ACTs. That was the headline. Everybody says, "Oh, gee, this is the death knell of the SAT and ACT." But what they lost in the report was, yeah, they may get rid of the SATs and ACTs, and actually they recanted this a little tiny bit this week. But instead, they're going to create their own test. So what they're basically doing is they're potentially replacing the SAT and ACT with a University of California based test. If a lot of other places follow suit, it might get to the situation where students are now taking actually more tests. Because if you live in a state and you want to go to college in California, you got to take the California test, you got to take the SAT. Maybe eventually there's a Pennsylvania test, a New Jersey test, a New York test, a Michigan test. Who knows? So yeah, the headline is they're going to get rid of it, but the subtext, the fine print, is they're replacing it with a test of their own that roughly 250,000 students are going to have to take. So you can read into these things different ways. Some people question what the real issue is. Again, they announced they're going to do it. But this article, if you read the whole article, and I wasn't able to abstract it, basically made the case that the issue is not the SAT or the ACT. The issue is that people put so much emphasis on just a little bit, and they don't look at the larger picture. So a good, well-rounded student with a lot of skills is always better than somebody who has a very, very narrow focus. So I'm going to get into timelines here. And again, you don't have to be furiously writing notes here. If anybody wants, I will send you the slides. But This is starting today, what's coming up through the end of next school year. And you can see there's a lot of opportunities to test, and some may be added beyond this. I've broken up a bit to the end of the school year, the one in June, the ACT, that's in a few weeks. You've got over the summer, ACT in July, SAT in August. Then you get into usually the bottom of that column would be called like the fall season, although obviously some of it's in the summer. Then you have the spring over on the other side, even though February, March technically are in the winter. Historically, when I grew up, most people parent age grew up, most people just tested in the spring. That was it. The fall ones really weren't a big deal. And that's kind of what happened. Now it's just spread out. I've had students really working at it and just trying to take the tests in the early part, September and October and November, and just get done. And it can happen sometimes. But this is just basically showing you all the possible opportunities to take the test. A common question I get is it bad to take the test too many times? The answer is no. College is looking for you to put your best foot forward. From a practical standpoint, the most I ever saw in 20 plus years of tutoring was a girl who took between the SAT and ACT 11 times. But I think from a practical standpoint, you're talking 4 or 5, because most people reach a point where they're going to plateau. This just came out today. This is cutting edge. This a parent actually sent me this. This is to register for future SATs. Your teen is now able to register for these tests. They get a head start. People who took the test, signed up for the test in June, and got canceled, whereas a junior who never took the test they get about a 10-day period to register for the tests in August and September. These new tests, August was already there, September and October. So they're going to get a head start on it. This is the rest of the letter, is that they're going to try to add more test dates over the summer. None are locked in. So there are the existing SAT tests right now. My guess is they'll maybe try to add one in July. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. If they're going to, it's going to have to be pretty soon just to get the word out. The issue is really finding places to administer the tests, not so much the desire to do it. And then this is just their kind of mea culpa on what happened with the pandemic and all. So, but the key here is the second paragraph. Many colleges have announced flexibility with their testing requirements. I'm not exactly sure what that means, flexibility with their testing requirements, but I think I'm interpreting it that you do what you can do your best, get your best stuff, put it in there, and you go from there. So here, this is a little dense, this next part, and what I'm just trying to show you, there's a lot of ways you can slice this. So typically sophomore year for a typical student, your one big job is to take the PSAT. It's always in October. I don't really recommend you do heavy duty prep for it. Some people do, but most people go in and take it. The rubber really starts to hit the road junior year. So here's kind of an idea for your junior year. As you start, you take the PSAT, you take an SAT and an ACT, then you take a break, and then based on what happens there, you can come back and decide what you're going to do. I'm not necessarily suggesting you take every test on this frame or every test in this slide, but this way you get the full diagnostic. You get the SAT and ACT in the fall. You take a step back, winter break, see how you did, see if you have a preference, and then you've got these 6 or 7 options coming into the spring. Another option might be something like this. This is just all SAT. Take the PSAT, SAT, see where you are, do the midterms at school, and then finally, this is an all ACT. This slide here would be for seniors, and seniors have a shorter window because they've already, they're trying to get their applications in place. And this would be your summer, things you could do in the summer, in between your junior and senior year. But the slide I really want to show you is this one. This is kind of the whole idea. And when I work with a family, this is one of the things we put together. Put together a master plan of what we're trying to do long term for the kids, what the kids are going to do. So you've got different entry points, sophomore year, early summer before junior year, early junior year, winter of the junior year. You've probably got 4 major entry points, depending on how early you want to start. So this slide is pretty much a kind of a synthesis of the other ones. But the point is, it's coming. You're going to have to deal with it. Things have been a little out of whack, but they're going to get back in place. And for your children, you want to know and think ahead where this is all going to go, especially if you're going to try to do it early in the year and you want to try to work on this over the summer. So, what options do we have at this point? Number one, you could prep over the summer. Historically, that's a really good time to do it because most people just aren't as busy. Sadly, a lot of kids who had plans to go to camp this year may not be able to realize them. So maybe this is a way to take advantage of this. Some people also are going to do some remediation academically over the summer. Maybe with some classes they didn't do as well as they wanted to, or they thing I'm really seeing right now because of the last month, a lot of schools just didn't teach as much as they usually do. They're 3, 4 weeks behind, 5 weeks behind in terms of curriculum. So some people are taking it upon themselves to make that up. Some people are going to try to accelerate, jump up a level, go from a regular class to an honors level. There's things you can do in summer to pad your resume, pad your application, volunteer, get jobs, network. These are things children can do, students can do, because these are things colleges like to see on the application. You can't, the day before you fill out a college application, go get a volunteer job and say you worked there for 30 hours. And you can prep. You can do some prep over the summer to take the tests in the fall, or you could prep in the winter to take the tests in the spring. Will all this impact your college plans? By all this, I mean this whole COVID scenario. And I'm going to tell you, in my opinion, I think this is supported by everybody I've talked to. It probably won't at all in the long run. It might change some standards. Maybe they're going to devalue the test for one cycle. Maybe it'll change some of the way things happen. Maybe they'll start to have online testing or more ability to take tests. It might change the prep a little bit. But I think in the end, that general formula, I could go back to that slide with the grades and the SAT and the extracurriculars and all that stuff. The key and the real message, and one of the big takeaways I hope everybody understands here is you want to plan ahead. You want to prepare for basically everything that could happen. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen either. Maybe in October we slide back and we have another recurrence of this, like some people say, and right back where we started. But all you can do is plan and prepare. These tests generally take 2 to 3 or 4 months to prep for. You don't want to prep for an SAT starting on Wednesday and take it Saturday. So you got to look at these timelines, these calendars. And again, I know I flashed them up there quickly. Be happy to make these slides available to people. And the last thing is just stay current. There's a lot of information out there. Some of it conflicts with each other. So you got to be careful where you get the information from. I generally go right to the source, the ETS and the ACT company, or I try to go right to admissions people. I try not to get my news from Twitter places of the world. But the key is it does change. And in the end, you got to deal with what you know to be correct. So again, here was our agenda, and we're kind of coming into a close here. What was the same? What was different? What are some timelines to prep? What options do you have? What are the admissions people thinking? Will this affect your plans? So we're going to go into the Q&A here. I'm going to flash this up here really quickly. If anybody wants to try to get a hold of me and doesn't know how to, basically the easiest way, the one thing probably simple is just take my email down. If you want to email me, sgreen@makethegrade.net. So I want to show you one last thing here. Here's some things you can do for support. These are things I do to support my students. I do a live presentation twice a week. I talk about current topics. In education, I have office hours that anybody can pop into if they have questions. I have my community, I have my podcast. I do tutoring. I actually have an unlimited tutoring option. I have about 6 people on this year. And I set up learning plans for people at home and remediation plans. These are all things people can take advantage of if you think it will help you. So I want to thank everyone. Danke, thank you, obrigado, merci, etc., etc. Let me come off of the share here. And one thing, there we go. All right, so I went through that fairly quickly. What I'm going to do here is if anybody has a question, we can address them now. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. So there's 2 ways you can ask questions if you want. If you want to unmute yourself and just shout out whatever your question is. I will try to address it. If you're shy, you can type it in the chat. The chat is kind of underneath. Here is the chat. Probably flash in your things, and I will put my contact info in there. Oh, thank you, Sherry. So, bottom line, in summary, this is really my take home. And I have kids. Those of you who know me, my kids are kind of past this. I tutored both my kids. That was an adventure. Those of you who are parents, um, it wasn't always pretty, but it worked because I stuck with the plan. I used the same system with them I used with every other kid I ever tutored in the last 20 years, which is over 10,000. And the key is to know your options, to plan ahead, and to kind of just look at what works for you within your system. You want to try to get at this stuff when you're not as busy, maybe, or get with this stuff when it works for you. But in the end, you got certain things you got to kind of check off your list. Am I getting the grades I need to get into the college I want to go to? Am I getting the SAT scores I want to get into the college I want to go to? And these are things that you want to take a look at. So let me go back here, see if anybody has any questions. All right. So far, none. This is good. Makes my life a little bit easier. Question, are you waving? Hang on, I'll unmute you. All right, you're unmuted, Allison. Or should be.
Wait, hold on. I think you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you have an answer to this question, but you have so much experience teaching, tutoring for these tests. Do you have like a sense of an average student, like how many weeks of test prep they need, or is that just really variable from student to student?
Well, it definitely varies student to student, but I would say if there's a median sort of value, like if you're trying to plan ahead, I would say 10 weeks. There's definitely people that can do it quicker. There's definitely ones that can't. Um, it, it, it depends on many things, your goals. I mean, look, you're not going to go from 1,000 to a 1,400 in 6 weeks. Motivation, commitment, there's a lot of intangibles as well. But if you're sort of trying to do a work back from like, here's when we're going to take the test, and here's where we're going to start, I would say 10 weeks is a good launch point. Keep in mind too that almost everyone, pretty much, I would almost say everyone at this point, is going to test multiple times, right? So if you're going to test, let's say in October, and we go 10 weeks back from October, then you test again in November and December, now you're talking almost, another 4, 6, 8 weeks. So but I would tell you to answer your question, push back from the first test you're going to take. So good question though. I probably mentioned that in there, but I talk fast. I don't usually talk as fast as I did, but I didn't want everybody to get bored. So somebody asked a question. Yeah, Sarah, this was recorded. It is being recorded. I will make it available. The reason anybody got stuck in the waiting room is because once we went into the screen share, I couldn't let anybody else in. So that's just a limitation of what's going on. But yeah, this was recorded, and it's not that complicated to make it available. I'll probably either put it on my website or in some kind of social media format. Any other questions? All right, this is good. Well, here's what I'm going to do then. If we don't have any questions, and hopefully everybody got some good information. Uh, if you want to get back with me later, just email me. I think the main thing, like I said, is to plan ahead. Planning ahead is the big thing with this. My goal for this presentation was to just try to get the landscape in place of how things are. By the time a 9th or 10th grader get through this process, we're probably going to be back to quote unquote normal. The most impacted population are kids who are juniors now, and not all of them were impacted as much. I had personally 11 kids I tutored who tested in October, November, December and got scores they wanted and were done. So even though there was all these setbacks in the spring, they weren't really worrying about them. Sorry. So let's see if we got anything else. All right. So here's the thing. I was asked by some people who couldn't make it tonight if I would do this again. I'd be happy to. I'm not sure when that would be. Maybe next week. Give it about a week for everybody to kind of get the word out. Uh, if you have any questions, just let me know. Summer's a good time to prep if anybody wants to talk about that in your own individual circumstance. Uh, and we'll go from there. As news presents, I'm going to try to keep people updated through my social media, my website, and some emails. So, last call for questions here. And otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording and we are going to wrap it up. Here we go, recording over.